All right, well, I think we should get started.
Yeah.
So welcome. This is the kind of culminating experience of what 12 faculty agreed on this last semester. Really excited to see what you guys did in the classroom, and I don't know if you have anything you want to say.
No, I think just thank you all for your efforts. We're really looking forward to hearing what people's experience was, and sharing lessons with colleagues and all that fun stuff. We got tons of food, so please help yourselves. And
where is this food from? This is all Oliver's.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kyle won that battle.
I did. We are 12 participants. We end at 2, so time is a little limited in that sense. So around 10 minutes per. If you go under that, that would be great. And
yeah,
if you want to go from there. I know that Mary has requested to go first because she has a guest with her, and so we'll go ahead and get started there. Screen share should be available to you. So
okay.
you can go ahead and get started there.
All right, we will go ahead and start then. I'm going to share my screen. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Mary Gail Stablein, and I teach EDSS 417 School and Society in the soon-to-be called the School of Education, Counseling, and Ethnic Studies Department. EDSS 417 is a prerequisite course for students entering the Teacher Credential Program. In this presentation, I will share the course goals, my process of learning what my students knew about AI, where and how I integrated AI into an established assignment, students' reactions, and my reflections and recommendations. And then one of my students, Brady Eck, is here with us today. He will share a student's perspective as well. Please note that the links to Canvas assignments are indicated in pink. So a little background, the School and Society course covers historical and modern perspectives of schooling and how both school and society affect one another. Students explore educational issues and share their knowledge with their colleagues. To begin the process of using AI in my course, I wanted to see what my 32 students knew about AI, and that would form the basis for how I would introduce, integrate, and or apply it. Hello?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, how I would introduce, integrate, and apply it to class conversations and or lessons. So I conducted a survey using Google Forms and asked them 3 questions. Have you used AI? Have you used AI for class assignments? And how have you used AI? Here are the results from the first 2 questions. Over 86% did not know what AI was or have had very little interaction with it. Over 90% had not used AI for class assignments or had used it once in a while. Here are their students verbatim from the 3rd question. How have you used AI? And so, they went into some detail, but to tease out their answers, 39.9% or only 13% of those 32 students had used AI for brainstorming, summarizing, researching, searching for ideas, rewriting. And this one response really, just kind of stood out to me. I've never used AI because there's a lot of negative feelings towards AI from professors, and they make AI sound incapable of genuine work. So using this survey information and knowing that I wanted to create a low anxiety environment, I created a goal for myself to integrate this low-level approach to the AI process within an existing lesson plan and have all students share, reflect, and think critically about the ChatGPT generative answers. I then formed student learning objectives that all students, as a peer reviewer, would demonstrate learning on how to use the AI process through a discussion board post. They would analyze the responses from ChatGPT, and then they would reflect and share what they had learned. With these in mind, I looked at previous assignments to see how I could easily integrate AI. Students had already created infographics on their chosen educational issues and presented them in 2-minute frameworks. Here are some examples: social media, influence in schools, LGBTQIA+ issues in schools, censorship in schools, and AI influences in schools. Well, obviously, seeing that one of my students, who happens to be here today, had created an infographic on AI influences in education, I thought, well, this is a perfect segue. So in their upcoming assignment, which was an in-depth 6-minute, 6-slide presentation in PowerPoint on the same educational issue, each presenter was assigned 2 peer reviewers. The AI portion of this assignment is indicated in blue font. Using the discussion board, they were to post a compliment about presentation skills, slide information, design, etc. Ask ChatGPT a research question. Was there an aspect of the educational issue they were still curious about, or did they still have questions? Post the prompt that they had asked ChatGPT and reflect and share questions or comments with colleagues. In addition, after peer reviewers had posted their review for the presenter, they were to reflect on their own learning. What did you ask ChatGPT to do? What did you learn about ChatGPT, and what surprised you? And they responded. And what they learned about ChatGPT was they knew that they had to ask something appropriately to get the accurate response that they wanted. It was surprisingly coherent and logically formatted in some cases. There was a lot of information that came at them, and it was easy to use. When asked what surprised them about ChatGPT, they were just so surprised at the speed of the fast tech. They felt honored to interact with it. But they were disappointed that it didn't cite any sources. They wanted more analysis. They loved that it was accessible to everyone at no cost or sign-up agreements. And it was lengthy information at times, but insightful. And it was a good resource to use. And they also gained insight as to why people use AI. So my reflections. I love that this was a low stakes exercise for me to learn about AI and how I can put it together with my lessons. I didn't have to rearrange my whole syllabus in order to integrate AI. I'll definitely, and I have shared more tools and incorporate them into more lessons and encourage critical thinking all the way through the lesson. What I would keep a survey, I think, because I'd like to know what my students know right from the outset to determine their knowledge levels. I build a lesson to ensure how all students would use it, even if they're timid about it, and share prompts and responses with the class. Going forward, what I would do differently, I would be more explicit about giving the students directions, because when I asked them, what did you learn about ChatGPT? They answered that. But then when I said, what surprised you? I should have said about ChatGPT, because some students responded to the answer that ChatGPT gave them, not that ChatGPT is a tool. So last week or this week, I modeled ChatGPT's other capabilities, such as feedback, grammar correction, etc., shared Magic School with them and showed them proper citation format. And this week, or next week, what are the days? Next week, I do want to do another survey to see how they will use this tool moving forward. My recommendations for everybody is just try it, enlist students in the process, be specific about what you want them to research, and then ask them to think critically. Use an existing lesson plan, model it, try different AI generators, definitely build in a reflection piece, and always remind the students it's a tool, not the end-all be-all. Thank you for your attention. And now I want to turn it over to Brady Eck, one of my aspiring students, and let's hear from a student's perspective.
Everyone see it okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Brady Eck, and I've been given the pretty cool opportunity to speak with you all about the student's perspective on AI in schools. As Professor Stablein discussed, each student in our class was given an educational aspect or subject. My subject was AI and its educational capabilities. My presentation starts off with some statistics I found in research and through asking my fellow students about AI. I tried my best to get a wide variety of takes, so I asked people from multiple majors to see how they use AI and how it affects their specific field. On the top left, you can see the statistics for accuracy in certain subjects when it comes to asking basic questions and facts. We learned that when you ask questions to AI that have real factual answers and like explanations, it will provide the correct response most of the time, but these percentages change drastically when ethics is put into play and logic. AI can't think for itself, let alone the betterment of humanity, so asking social or ethical questions is ineffective in most cases. But when you ask it the factual stuff, it usually can provide very, very insightful things. Now I'm just gonna, most of you, I don't want to take up too much time, so I'm gonna pass by the government's response, which I'm sure a lot of you are already familiar with. Move on to another assignment that I had in another class, with Professor Emily Acosta. She gave us an assignment where we had to use nothing but AI to help us research and develop and present a topic provided to us. My presentation was on the third person effect, which is a rather simple concept when you start to get familiar with it, but it had a lot to unpack. Our presentation had to be 10 minutes long, and we had to use ChatGPT, Perplexity, and Gamma. My partner and I used Perplexity to provide us with sources and simplified research. We then used ChatGPT to help us organize that research into subjects and PowerPoint slides. And then we made a rough draft presentation in Google Slides so that we had the info in the correct order and how we wanted the info per slide. And then we uploaded that presentation to Gamma, which for those of you who don't know, Gamma is a AI source where it generates a presentation for you, which was actually pretty fun to witness, but very hard to work with. It's a little bit complex. But after finally figuring out how Gamma works, it spat out a presentation not so different from our rough draft, but a lot more professional looking and aesthetically pleasing. Now, with all three of these AI systems, each one has their faults and their problems. And we had to try a lot of different things before we got the hang of it. But the end result, we got a lot of good stuff. But the main point is that I thoroughly enjoyed this project because I had never used AI to such a degree before, even less so on like an actual research project. Teachers can begin to implement this, I think, implement assignments like these a little bit more to get students more working on it, because this type of assignment didn't allow me or my partner or anyone to use AI just to do it all. It didn't allow us to depend on AI to such a degree that we didn't actually do the assignment. It forced me to use AI exclusively as a tool for research rather than anything else, because I couldn't ask it to present the subject for me. So I still had to study the third person effect. I still had to know my presentation, know the subject. And it was really insightful to learn how to use AI in that kind of aspect. And then skimming through the next slide, I briefly discussed some keywords that help my friends and I use AI to the best of its ability and to not have it create responses, but find them and then support them with research and articles for any students to further look into. And then I kind of discussed the websites that I used and what their uses are: Perplexity, ChatGPT, and Gamma, as I discussed a little bit before. That is basically my entire presentation. So, in short, the experiences I've had with AI with certain classes and certain professors are doing really well in teaching me how to properly use it and properly apply it to certain assignments. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Brady. Let's give him our appreciation for sure.
I applied some of the things from the CTED workshop on AI to, well, several things sort of sporadically this semester, but I'm just going to focus on two main things. And I'll start with the student project. It was for a course, I teach in political science, and the course is Modern Political Ideologies, Pulse 315. And I took a pre-existing project and modified it to use AI. The course has about 30% of the students are majors, so I have a lot of non-majors in there. It's a GE course. I organize students into groups of 3 to 5 students, depending on the size of the class. Advance this. So before AI, I had students in groups, and they had to create a dialogue involving 3 or 4 representatives of different ideologies, and each team was assigned a different topic. Some examples of the topics that teams do. What should the role of religion be in society? How can we end homelessness in the US? What should be taught in public schools? And what how do you feel about a proposed 40% tax increase on the rich?
Topics.
So I have it pre-AI, I had students work on creating about, depending on the class size, about a 10-minute to 15-minute dialogue with representatives of different ideologies. With AI, I modified this project by having the AI do the initial work. I prompted the ChatGPT to create a dialogue between 3 or 4 members of different ideologies. And then I had the students critique what the AI came up with. Here's a sample of a prompt I gave to the students, not to ChatGPT. So I have different ideologies represented, and this was the specific topic. By the way I teach Old 315, the ideologies we look at throughout the semester are the 3 traditional ideologies: liberalism, conservatism, and socialism. But there's also fascism, liberation ideologies, feminism, anarchism, environmentalism, and the religious fundamentalism. So there are a lot of roles or characters that can be used in these various dialogues. So with AI, I had the AI do it first. So instead of students starting from scratch, I told AI what to do, and then I gave to each group what ChatGPT came up with, and then they had to critique it. And they turned in a paper that evaluated the depth of what the AI had come up with. Did they faithfully represent each ideology, and were there any biases? So that's the first part of the project. The next part was on their own, students in their groups would elaborate on the short AI dialogue, which I guess if you spoke it out loud would only be a few minutes, but now they have to create one that lasts 10 to 12 minutes. And finally, on presentation day, they would read out their dialogue. So each person on the group would be representing a different ideology, and they'd read their dialogue. I told them this is not a drama class, so they don't have to be very good at it. They're marking down for any of that. So I thought this was a good exercise, well, beforehand, but I thought it was good because within a group, they got to look more closely at each ideology and how members of that ideology might respond to each other in conversation. But with the AI, they can learn about some of the strengths and weaknesses of what in this case, ChatGPT can come up with. The project, especially on presentation day, also helps as a kind of review final exam, because every team does their dialogue, and so you're going to hear about all the different ideologies. And at the end of each one, there's a full class discussion about partly what the AI came up with, but also other groups can ask the presenting group, I don't think you did quite right on the far right anarchist, and this is why. Some of the feedback I got from the students echoed what I thought ChatGPT was doing in its dialogue. One team said the AI characters only offered surface level insights. Another team said that ChatGPT only got it half right, proving its tendency towards adopted biases, inconsistency, and unreliability. Another team described the AI dialogue as a really promising start. And one team chose to completely ignore what the AI came up with and do it from scratch, which was their the other major application of the workshop this semester was presentation I gave to my department. It was only 15 minutes, so I didn't have time to get into some of these topics. The slideshow I used Gamma, which has come up already, and the topic I told Gamma to create an 8-slide presentation was on gender in the news media. And the AI, the slideshow that Gamma created in just a few seconds was impressive, but shallow. And so there were sorts of content. Content was generally good. Some of the topics that came up were good, but kind of shallow. And I really didn't like the formatting of the slides. Often font sizes were too small. There were way too much information on each slide. So it was kind of a good start that needed change. And I agree with one of the earlier speakers that it's kind of funky to work. Okay, for the demonstration to the department, I simply told ChatGPT to create a lit review on the growing polarization in American politics. And sure enough, in about 5 seconds, the AI churned out a halfway decent lit review on that topic. Wasn't great, but it was a good start. I brought 2 handouts with me. I went sort of old school, and I brought 2 handouts to this department briefing. One listed lots of different ways that AI could specifically be used for teaching political science. And what I tried to do is make 3 or 4 different ways of using AI based on the specific subdiscipline within political science. And if you're not familiar with the subdiscipline in political science, here they are. So for each one of these, I tried to come up with 3 or 4 different ways AI can be applied. The faculty response to all of this was, well, I wasn't sure what to expect because I wasn't sure how much people were using AI. And it turns out people in my department aren't using it. Either they're not using it at all, they know about it, a couple have used it hesitantly. So it was kind of eye-opening for them to see, what could be done with AI, but also some of the shortcomings. One of the unresolved issues, we were supposed to talk about unresolved issues, and the one that seemed to come up the most in this department briefing was cheating. How do we stop cheating? There used to be, well, there still is turn it in, but now it's complicated with AI. So the faculty were like, well, what do we do about cheating? And what I've learned from the workshop and talking to Kyle is that there's no silver bullet to student cheating. There was one case I had this semester of a student who I could tell after using ChatGPT that this student probably used it too. We resolved the issue, but I can get into that. But it's going to be hard. There might be false positives, and how do you prove that the student cheated? So what I've also learned is that we're going to have to rethink our assignments. That our assignments should have certain objectives, and now we're going to have to figure out how to assess those objectives in a world that's using AI. Especially, it's something I changed immediately this semester after we started this workshop was one of my classes is all online, and I stopped assigning essay exams because the AIs are so fast. If you give students 10 minutes to write an essay, the AI will churn it out in 5 seconds, and then they can manipulate it to make it look like it's from students. So so that's an unresolved issue. Another unresolved issue, which is specific to my discipline, but also is going to affect lots of different disciplines, is how we not how we do research, which definitely is going to change, but how we teach research. Because AI is about gathering information, processing information in new ways, how we teach research methods is going to have to change. So that's something for the very near future. Some of the lessons I learned from this semester, I kind of put them into 2 categories, so specific and broader. So one specific lesson is that AI can be very good for brainstorming. And I've used that off and on this semester. Not to create course outline, I've been teaching for a while and I don't know if I'm going to teach a new course again, so I don't need to use AI for that. But just for practice, I picked some course I'd never taught and had AI create a syllabus, and it was pretty good rough draft. So it can be used for lots of things like that. One of the other specific things I learned is that you have to work with. You can't just say do this or ask this question. And then get what you want and have to work. For example, a few days ago, I asked ChatGPT to create a list of sources on some topic. And very quickly, it gave me a bunch of sources and they looked, I asked for academic sources and they looked good. But I noticed that they were all kind of 25 years or older. So I tweaked the prompt, or I prompted again and say, provide academic sources from 2015 for something like so it created a new list. So it's something you have to work with and not expect perfect results right away. Some broader lessons. Most students should get training in AI. And I faculty with a question mark because I'm sure there are plenty of faculty who they'll just figure it out on their own, but I personally found this workshop very useful. And the other very broad thing is that we're at the beginning of a real change in how information's gathered and processed. And, I wonder what will workshops look like in 5 years and 10 years? How will people be using this stuff at that point? I'm closer to the end of my career than the beginning, but I can imagine how younger faculty are going to be dealing with this stuff in a lot of different ways in the coming years. To close out my presentation, I have 3 quick recommendations. Students are probably instantly going to see the power of AI and be impressed, especially at how fast they can churn stuff out, whether it's a slideshow or just answering a question. But critical thinking, we should all be teaching that all the time anyway, but now we have to do that with AI. Students need to know that the AIs might be inaccurate. They make up stuff, hallucinations. The most common thing my students noticed was a lack of depth, but also all kinds of biases. Another recommendation is that faculty better stay ahead of the students. We're going to use AI whether you do or not. And the third one is kind of related to that. If you're hesitant about AI, start using it and ask around, take a workshop, because it's here to stay. Okay.
Okay, so yeah, I'd like to slow talk to you about regulation. As a criminologist, how do we regulate this? And I'm not totally confident about that. Definitely the industry will be very influential. I like the poll.
Yeah.
So really quickly, I did it in an Alexa series class, the SIG class. Well, professionals come in and talk about their careers. And these are mostly criminology, criminal justice majors. And we had different people from black and brown and blue to actually convicted white collar criminals coming in next week, to people who were in prison for 10, 20 years. So my students got to help all these different perspectives about the criminal justice code, not just the people in it, but people who had to deal with it. Okay, so I asked my students, and I know Millie and other folks did this, but I kind of got surprised that most people knew about it, like 80% knew about ChatGPT, but about half actually used it. So when I would show ChatGPT in class, so Perplexity, my students were like, huh? So I thought students would be a lot more knowledgeable about it. I don't know if other people had that same problem, but I noticed that was a common thing. And again, Millie did this, so I'll kind of be brief on this, is I asked students, what do you know about ChatGPT? And they said it can answer questions, but you got to be careful because if you don't cite it, you can get in trouble, right? So that's a common thing. Students recognize the issues with it. So have faith in our students. That's the good news. At least they recognize the ethical issues with it. And I asked them what could be a problem with AI, and they're like not being critical thinking, not using their own information. So that's all stuff we already talked about. So we'll skip over that. So AI in the news, I sent this one to Kyle. This has to do with a book, an AI written book that talked about mess rooms, like which mess rooms are healthy. And of course, the book was inaccurate and was a bunch of junk on Amazon that are written by AI. So as academics, we have to pay attention to, can this harm people? So that's something, another one, again, that's more of a criminologist, is college kids are being victimized. The Federal Trade Commission has noted that they're releasing basically AI job ads out there, collecting students' information, and then you saying, oh, Emily, give me I need your social security so I can give you this job and this check, and they'll really manipulate students. So the Federal Trade Commission has said college students are a major victim of AI. So again, there's a lot of good things about AI, but as academics, we also need to warn our students about how to protect themselves a little bit closer. And so my assignment was simple. I won't bore you with this, but I wanted my students to do a simple assignment. This is not a very, this is an easygoing class. I said, what's white collar crime, right? These are crimes committed by the elite in our society. They're often more physically harmful. I always think of a number of crimes. So I asked AI, what's white collar crime? This is ChatGPT. It involves nonviolent crime. And I found in my show, because I knew it was probably pointed from the FBI's website, because that's how the FBI defines it. So when I asked it more questions. I'm keeping it simple. All white collar crimes violent are typically nonviolent. And so, and actually, I'm going to use this, talking to Kyle, I'm actually going to use this definition in my book on white collar crime with Dr. Grant, saying that not only does the FBI mislead people about how white collar crimes are, AI can also mislead people about white collar crimes. And so the question is, all white collar crimes really nonviolent? Well, all you have to do is look at a bow and say they knew about the problems. If I took a gun and put bombs around the campus and they would randomly go off, I'd be a criminal. These guys knew about it. They knew of the problems. Alaskan Airlines knew of the problems. Why do they keep flying their plane when they knew of it? I would never fly Alaskan Airlines. They have a whole history. A whole history. You could watch it on a PBS called Cutting Corners. Alaskan Airlines employees cutting corners. So is Southwest. I would never fly them. I don't trust Boeing and anything they say. So again, those are very violent crimes. And also the CPAC. Anyone know? I have to use the CPAC, but CPAC Phillips knew that the CPAC machines were breaking, the phone was breaking apart and getting in people's line. They knew for 7 years and nothing about it. In fact, they increased their promotional ads on this stuff. So again, all white collar crimes nonviolent. Those are just two simple examples. Birth control, even period underwear, all these things I talk with my students about, the highly violent stuff that people claim are safe but are not. So again, I think AI, obviously that was a good sample for my students to recognize. You can't believe everything it's said on AI and what it's doing. So again, I'm going to be very quick here. How do I use it in my research? So Kyle, I think I'll blame Kyle for the perplexity. And actually, I love perplexity because I can ask it, give me citations on the most recent price fixing scandals or scams. And all of them talk about how hotels are using algorithms to fix prices. Yeah. Okay, so those are the, I can ask it to do 100. So I actually put that in my book that I use perplexity to locate 100 of the most recent price fixing scandals. So again, as a researcher, I could quickly, and again, I see this as a good thing. I could use this to speed up some of the more recent examples of price fixing. And so I really thought that was really cool. And even, I hate doing that. How many of you guys hated doing citations? I hate citations. I hate it. I remember in grad school, I used to spend like an hour every day working on my dissertation sites. I could do it in 2 seconds. Yeah. But as Scott, Bob said, he said you have to tweak it. I had to tweak it. So even with APA, it's wrong. So you got to put in like awful Bob and then your last name, and it would actually do it correct. So that's how I use perplexity. And actually, some of the other things is how do we use it in the future? As Bob was saying, it's here to stay. So I asked Perplexity to give me some ideas about how to integrate AI into my assignments. And I talked about this criminology professor actually said to use AI to analyze stories of crime and the limitations of it. And actually, some of this is from looking at some of the stuff John's doing, is how might we examine AI use in criminal justice? So since it's here to stay, and as academics, we really need to be on cutting edge of how this would be used for evidence, how would courts accept that information. My wife is using these programs to predict criminality, like literally it's tracking the cell phone stuff, all but it could predict what people are. It's just crazy. She can't tell me everything, but I have an idea what's going on. So it's just really crazy, even if you're driving around. So it's just, so how do we get students to pay attention to using AI. And my conclusion, because I kept it very quick, is, as Bob was saying, it's here to stay. So I wonder what the future holds, jobs. So we have to get our students ready to deal with AI. Otherwise, we're not doing it on a service. So again, some of our colleagues are very hesitant. I hear them saying things like, it's not allowed in my classroom, in my school. It's like telling your kids don't have sex. It's not going to work. So tell them how to be safe from AI. That's it. That's my presentation.
Hi, everyone. Can folks online hear me and see the screen okay?
I see a thumbs up.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then I will just go up and down this way. Perfect. All right.
Yes, can see it. I can see it and hear it, Puspa.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Puspa. I'm from the economics department, and the title of today's presentation is What I Learned from This Learning Community and What I Think My Students Learned. All right, here we go. So I'm a bit of a Luddite when it comes to AI, primarily because I was scarred with a lot of online teaching and very, very highly suspicious plagiarism and cheating incidences. However, I have been sensing the need to keep honing and changing my pedagogical skills in light of changing student landscape, changing difficulties in which students approach higher education, and also a lot of a lot of our students are, from underrepresented minorities. They face a different set of challenges than regular students. So I joined a couple of different learning communities, and if the critical success course is offered again in the future, I will also recommend that. I think Gurman and Mark are also part of that. Class I regularly teach is Econ 204, Introduction to Macroeconomics. It is quote unquote a traditionally challenging course because it has a high depth of rate. Okay, so that's my kind of like my motivation for joining this. But I'm a bit of a latecomer, and I am a little bit late in coming to what are the range of options that I can provide higher education. So in that sense, for a real novice like me, the two books, I forgot to bring them up, but you guys know what books I'm talking about. It's those over there. Those ones there that were given, the AI literacy and perspective. Perfect. Thank you, Rob. Thank you. And to anybody online who's still kind of like thinking about how I start this, these were really great introductory tools. I learned that, for the instructor, you can use it as a tool to help class preparation. And it did cut down class preparation substantially, but that's not because of AI, it's because I already knew what to put in. And for the students, there's also a variety of different ways that AI can help. And I think some of our colleagues already introduced here. The one that I was attracted with and I wanted to play around with was that using AI to be a personal tutor. I did also learn from this class that prompt engineering is key. It's like going on a blind date, right? You can never really get to know the next person. It's speed dating unless you ask good questions. My comment wasn't as crazy as Bryan's. Sorry. And this community also provided really, really helpful and insightful discussions. Especially, I'm also feel a sense of camaraderie, hearing that other faculty members also have the same two-sided approach for technology. On the one hand, it's great, it can help us do our jobs more efficiently, but on the other hand, there's ethical dilemmas related to it, among others. I remember Gurman asked early on, if I ask ChatGPT to create a rubric for my class, and then I put it on, how much can I really claim I created for my students? These are important questions that I'm not going to be answered really quickly. Just like the others that have presented earlier, I was surprised that not every student had learned it, nor know what are the possible ranges of opportunities that they could use it with. And yes, there is a little bit of that negativity too, because, we're afraid to use it because of reasons mentioned earlier, but I think that's an understandable reason, and these are norms that will change as long as everybody knows the users. That's what I framing, I think, is super important. That's what I think I haven't, some of these are already mentioned by fellow faculty members here, but I think framing it is super important. So I want to share a little bit about how I initiated the conversation about AI to my students. Okay, so I said that in economics, technology has always been a force of good and a force of evil at the same time. When we had technology that created telegraph, the Pony Express jobs were destroyed, and then you had more jobs for telegraph. But this type of technology looks like it's here to stay, and I showed them this article that the Pew Research Center said that 20% of people in the workforce are using it. So I said, if I didn't at least try to introduce it to you guys and talk about it and teach you what it can do, we'll be doing it a disservice. And so also, this is just, I'm not going to go over this really quickly. This is just an example of what I put in the students' handout when I introduced the topic of AI to them. I really tied it into one of the course themes, which is income inequality in the US has been rising gradually since the 1980s. And one of the causes of that is the technological revolution of the 70s that created more jobs for college educated people. And so we had the college premium. We're at the cusp of a new revolution in technology. We don't know yet where that's heading, but at least let's try to know. Okay. Given that I already had my class set up before I learned this learning community, what I did is to give the students an option to use ChatGPT to augment their assignment, which is a signature assignment using something everybody should already know, supply and demand, right? You see it all around us, prices go up and down. But students always have a hard time trying to use the models, the actual theoretic tools to process the information that they see to understand what's going on. So this was the assignment. And then I had already kind of scaffolded it. So as preparation to the going scene, finding a news article for that. And Kyle helped me a lot for creating this assignment. I also see that theme of like, ooh, I don't want to be a Luddite, but I also know that it's here to stay, but I'm also concerned about what I feel comfortable with in terms of the students. So I was very specific into what they can use ChatGPT for their assignment. I gave them two options. Either you could ask good questions. I showed the example of prompt engineering, good prompt engineering looks like, right? I said that you could find articles that will help you use for this assignment, which for the majority of them that take this seriously, they do spend at least 2-3 hours looking for that article. It does take time for some of those who want to take this assignment seriously. And I said you could also use it to help you think about how you create necessary graphs for your articles. And here are excerpts of what the students learned. Okay. This is highlight a couple of sentences. It helps speed up my research process. It is good when using in combination with our own analysis. But I like that there was also the part where I believe ChatGPT can be useful and help you find inspiration on what to write, but I had a hard time grasping whether this information being given is correct. And to that part, this is material that students already know and have been engaging with for at least 2/3 of the semester. So they did have the tools to evaluate whether or not this information was useful. Okay, I'll explain a little bit more on this last part once I get to my last part, which is reflections and recommendations. When students try to use ChatGPT to help them create graphs, I think they found that the free version of ChatGPT is very limited because it's the one that I use as well, and it was giving triangles. Everybody knows supply and demand. It looks like there's an X, right? You have equilibrium in the middle, right? And so they were giving very inaccurate or inaccessible tools. So that might be something to mention about the free version and the version. I also think that emphasizing using AI effectively will involve some trial and error. Many students don't know that AI can help them do their research. A lot of them are like, yes, they use it for my homework, but I don't want to rely on it. Like they're dealing with this ethical dilemma too. I think it's helping them when they're desperate, but they have also some moral quandaries about it too. And I said, well, you can use it for other things. Oh, really? That was a surprise that I learned. And lastly, for those of you faculty or students or anybody interested in getting more, I totally support what Bob said earlier, get more training. But let me add to that, that there's also a number of different items in the menu you can choose from and choose one that you feel more comfortable with. I feel like I'm less of a Luddite. Thank you, everybody.
All right. So, hello, I'm Elizabeth Stanny, a professor in the School of Business. So today I'll share my insights on introducing AI to my students in Business 320, Business Data Analysis and Interpretation. So this course is required for business majors, and my class has 40 traditional aged juniors and seniors. Most students don't have any programming experience. On Mondays, I give lectures and we go over coding examples. And on Wednesday, students complete assignments in the computer lab and then they post them to their blogs. So the course, just to give a bit of an overview of the course has 4 learning objectives. First, to help students determine the question they want to answer with their data analysis. Second, determine what data they need to address the question and prepare the data so that they'll be able to conduct the analysis. And third, apply appropriate data analytic methods. And then fourth, interpret and present their results. So we use R on Post-it Cloud for data analysis. The platform allows students to write and run code in the cloud. And it's great for students who don't have a computer and relatively easy for students who don't have programming experience. And students are posting their assignments to their blog. So one of the big challenges in this course is that students struggle with coding errors, and the error messages are not always that helpful. So it's kind of time consuming to diagnose and correct the errors, and it's not, the focus of the course isn't really programming, it's more data analysis, and we're just using some programming tools to do that instead of other possibilities. So a lot of times students will send me screenshots of their errors and it's impossible to figure out what's going wrong. So this is where AI came in. So to make it easier for students to correct their coding errors, I introduced AI into the course. So I did not integrate AI throughout the semester. I just did it for one topic. So last Monday, I gave a lecture on AI and discussed its role in data analysis, predictive modeling, and decision-making. So I covered the benefits of AI, including automation and efficiency, as well as the challenges, including hallucination, biases, and ethical considerations, and as well as privacy issues. And then to prepare them for the lab assignment, we worked through examples using ChatGPT to diagnose coding errors. And if you're interested in the lecture, you can click on this link and it is there. Oh, there. Click on this link and it's there. And so the lab activity, I will click on this. So this was the lab activity that we did. This is diagnosing coding errors with ChatGPT. And they had to create a new post that they were going to put their work in and then post it to their blog. And they had to go through and load the data. And I had ChatGPT make up the fake data. And then they had to, here was where we come down to 4, where we start looking at code that has an error. And they run the code and then indicate what the error they get out of the program, and then they work with ChatGPT to get a response, and then answer the question, did the response explain the error, and then put the corrected code in this chunk and rerun it. So they had to go through 1, 2, 3, 4 of those examples, coding errors, and then they were asked, did you find the response from ChatGPT was more helpful than the error message? Explain. And how likely are you to use ChatGPT to assist you in programming? So most of the students found ChatGPT to be very helpful, but some of them didn't really know that while ChatGPT was giving them a response, they weren't able to interpret it that well, and they thought the response was correct. And they got some code to work, but it wasn't actually the correct code. So there definitely needed to be some more discussion about determining whether what is coming out of ChatGPT is actually correct. And then a lot of them thought the really detailed explanations and suggestions were really helpful from ChatGPT. So that was good. So just to give you a few examples of student feedback, this one, oops, let me get out of here. So this one here, so this is to the last two questions. So this is the first example of feedback, and this is kind of indicative of what a lot of students said. They found it really helpful when diagnosing errors. And then if ChatGPT didn't give them the right response, some of them were able to give a follow-up question and then get the correct answer for where the error was. And then there were kind of mixed responses on how likely they are to use ChatGPT in programming. So on a scale of 1 to 5, one person's like, I will give it a 5, but I'm worried about this technology and the problems that can come from it, such as accuracy, but then nonetheless, it's helpful. And then I thought this guy's was kind of funny. Yes and no. Nice to have more fleshed out feedback. But in the end, he said, I would not trust my life or my grade to this machine.
That's fair.
So, some of them are still kind of wary of what's coming out, which is good. So some reflections. What to keep? I would continue to use ChatGPT to diagnose coding errors. It was really helpful. The students really liked it. And as much as I can keep screenshots out of my email, it's a fantastic tool. So I would also incorporate more tools in the course, such as, well, I thought probably should what I would be changing, but anyways, I would also incorporate Copilot into it, GitHub Copilot, because that's pretty amazing in terms of suggesting what the next code should be instead of the next text. So that was really good seeing how that worked. And I'd give them more opportunities to use it. What would I change? Address the accuracy of the responses from ChatGPT, give more examples of when it failed and how to notice that it was failing. And integrate it more throughout the whole course instead of just at the end. I would put this working with errors at the very beginning of the course instead of at the end of the course. But even though I did include it last week, still people are sending me screenshots of errors. So I'm not quite sure they grasp the power. And recommendations, as I said, included earlier, discuss more the benefits and challenges and encourage students to use it. I will mention one thing that I just learned today, which kind of terrifies me, which is a deep fake of the voice of a principal in Baltimore. So anyways, I'm nervous about having my voice recorded in case anyone decides to come at me. But anyways, what happened with this poor principal is another employee recorded this deep fake, which sounded really real, and spread it throughout the community, and the principal lost his job temporarily. But then they found out, when they investigated further, they found out it was the other employee who was trying to get back at the principal. But that seems pretty traumatic. So anyways, I hope I don't suffer from that fate. And thank you.
Mine's thematically very similar to Elizabeth Stanny's. And that was a very realistic Elizabeth Stanny AI generated recording. That's what my students are intro to programming class. We work in Python, and they have a hard time with error messages. Feel like the error messages necessarily make sense. So the process they usually go through is, darn, my code doesn't work. I'm going to Google the error messages, which will lead me to some Stack Overflow posts. And then I'll take something from Stack Overflow, hopefully answer section as opposed to the question section, and paste it in and see if that fixes it. And if it doesn't, then I'll back out and then try again.
find some like other Stack Flow. So like this really has the potential to synthesize the advice in the sense that it's at least as bad as finding 100 Stack Overflow posts and printing them all out and stepping back and being like, which of these might apply? That maybe it'll be better at saying you can use your brain on figuring out how to apply the advice that is collectively out there, as opposed to like looking for and guess check and revising the advice. So my approach of using it in class was I hit a natural point where I was doing a demo and I would show it being able to be used as a personal tutor. So I used ChatGPT as sort of a personal tutor to get insight into what the meaning of an error message was, and then go through the steps to ameliorate the error. And then we used it from that point on in the semester in lab. So we have a 3-hour lab, and anytime somebody had an error, I would sort of be one-on-one with them to say like, well, let's go to ChatGPT and see what it says this means and figure out how to work. And I liked that approach because it gave me better insight into how they're using it when like I was there with them and seeing how they're using it. Like a lot of other people, my students will claim to have never heard of ChatGPT or have heard of it but never used it or whatever. Like I didn't conduct a formal poll. Maybe next time I will, and I'll ask questions more formally. I'm kind of curious. I'll ask, have you heard of it? Have you used it? And then maybe I'll do the same thing like more just see how true it is. But like the in demo, like this is a weird error that I hit. And there's a problem here that's the first time we've used errors because we've been using files, and so this is a weird error. And so saying like, oh, what does this mean? How do we use it? And I asked students if they knew where the error was coming from. And it was like they usually take that error messages as a response of more like an emotional response. Like it's effectively as if a frowny, crying, vomiting emoji was just printed. And it takes some time to say like, oh, there's something going on in line 8. And to have a reaction that is more than just wrong and emotions to sort of disentangle. So getting students to the point where they recognize that this isn't, a negative emotion that's being thrown at them, that this is a message that will help them solve their problem, is a step. And so I'm happy when students can say there's something going on in line 8, but moving them past that is a continued struggle. So like where is the error from? What does it mean? And then the next step is like, how do we fix it? So really ChatGPT I found to be helpful in steps 1 as a personal tutor and possibly 2. So I demonstrated using ChatGPT and it spat out, like the prompt was explain this error message to me, copy paste, and then got this big response. And I could see in class, all of them look terrified. Like ChatGPT will give me more homework. And then I said, okay, I can summarize it, but explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old. And then they felt relieved and impressed. And so this capability made a lot of sense. And I'd say, okay, do the detailed explanation shorter and an 8th grade reading. And they were like, this is great. And then I did some more demonstrations, like put it in Farsi, put it in Spanish, give it to me in the form of a kid's storybook like lesson, like make up, and then it made up this little lovely story that vaguely did kind of relate to the error message. And then I asked, collectively, do we have a better idea at like how to solve the problem going on in that line? And they did. They sort of guided me through what it was. And then in lab, we would say, okay, great, you found a bug. Is it coming from your program or somewhere else, like library? Like that's kind of the first step. Do you know what this error message means? Have you ever encountered it before? And then we'd say, okay, well, let's use ChatGPT to investigate. That was sort of my basic prompt moving forward whenever there was a request for help. Like, where's this coming from? Do you know what it means? Have you ever seen it before? Let's ask ChatGPT. And my big experience is that students didn't know how to ask the questions that would lead them to the learning experience. That it was much easier for them to copy the code causing the problem and paste into ChatGPT. And annoyingly, that kind of works, right? Like it will say, I think you mean to be asking me a question about fixing this terrible code. Here, I fixed it for you. And it gets you some of the way. And it's much harder for them to ask, to prompt correctly, to get sort of a one-on-one tutor experience. And they don't play in the way that I thought they'd play. They just take the thing that's causing the grief, pasting it in, and the results that come from ChatGPT are what they are. But it's basically much easier to cheat, whether students want to or not.
Yeah.
And they sometimes I would say, like, why don't we ask it what's going on? And their first reaction was, okay, I'll pull it up and I'll paste my problem into it. And then it gives the answer. Be like, I wonder if that is the appropriate response. And be like, well, you didn't actually ask it for help. You just kind of pasted the problem.
Yeah.
So that's exactly the thing that professors are worried about. That even students that mean to use it as a tutor, it's too easy to not use it as a tutor or to use it incorrectly and just get the answer. And when they had trouble, when things didn't come back that they could understand, they didn't play with my prompts independently. Like they didn't do the sort of prompting that I had done in my demonstration of prompt engineering. So it's complicated and it's worthy of direct instruction, and it doesn't come natural. And students didn't really, they're at the college level. And so my examples, like explain it to me like an 8-year-old, they didn't want to do that themselves. Like they don't mentally realize. So I think that might take a lot of modeling from us to say like that's okay. There's nothing shameful about an 8th grade reading level. It's just like, that makes it easier. Like it puts my cognitive load in a much more productive place than to like read so much. Summarizing is not that you have failed as a reader. It's that you are too busy as a productive college student. And then as the semester went on, students who got better at prompt engineering using this regularly as a tool did end up running into some real roadblocks because ChatGPT often did not have the context necessary to make good advice. Like an error was coming from unit test, and the solution that it came up with was basically change the unit test until it passes. And like the student didn't control the unit test. My testing facility ran it. So like they couldn't act on that. And I'm like, actually, you know, the other way to solve it is to change your code and make a focus on that part. So yeah, it's very interesting. I think I would continue to integrate it. But because it's so easy to turn the getting supportive aid into like getting this unsupportive aid, just like, I don't know how to do the prompting right, so I'll copy paste the problem. And then what comes back, that could be ameliorated if we could build a custom GPT to sort of put the baked in, like you are an X and you have to work with the audience like they're a Y. Like I would feel more comfortable if I build a custom GPT, having my students use that custom GPT, get the right sort of supportive. Because whether they want to cheat or not is not an issue. Like it just, prompt engineering is a skill. And if it becomes a harder skill than programming, and then it defeats the point. And so, yeah, it's much easier to get unsupported HSACs than especially students whose mentality is like, I am learning. Learning is me experiencing enough correct answers that I understand. So like, if I read the answer and I get it, then that is learning and it's not bad. And so like, if I can use those tools to see more correct answers, then it feels good. And I think that's learning. And I don't think that's true personally. And I don't think the literature thinks that that's true all the time. So I don't know how to give them the experience that getting 5 answers quickly won't help them generate the 6th answer. So I'd love to figure out a way to bring that into my classroom so that they see this in context with their own learning and not in context of the slog towards getting their work done. Well, having life. And that's it. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Hello, everyone. So before I get started, I just wanted to say that my presentation was not generated by ChatGPT or any other AI. This is all original work. And then the second thing is I want to introduce myself. I'm Malinalli López, and I teach in AMCS and also Chicano and Latino Studies. And in both departments, I teach classes that ask a similar question, which is, how do people of color, and especially Latinos and Mexican and Chicano people, how are they able to challenge and even overcome processes of colonization? So how do they shape their own resilience, and what tools do they use to shape their own resilience? So this is one of the main questions that I ask across my classes. And I find AI so fascinating because I believe it brings me back to ground zero of what my research is, which is asking this question, right? So today's presentation is titled AI Ethics, Biases, and Limitations. And for example, I see the Spaniards, when they first arrived in Mexico in order to colonize the land, they were the reverse ChatGPT, because one of the first things that they did and talked about was, how do we completely eradicate all of the literature of Mexico? How do we completely get rid of it, right? And that's what they said about doing, is to completely destroy every single book that they encountered. So because of that, in a way, one could argue that there's a gap in the knowledge base in Mexico because of that point of colonization. So then the next interesting thing that happened is that some of the Spanish clergy then decided, well, we're not really making traction in converting people to Catholicism. So maybe the next best thing to do is to hire some of these indigenous scholars, to write a book that categorizes all the different aspects of indigenous thought. So then we, the Spaniards, can understand how they're thinking. And if we understand how they're thinking, then we can convert them, to our ways and, to our religion, right? So in this moment when this happened and they were putting together, for example, one of the books is called Florentine Codex. And in the Florentine Codex, there was this attempt to, categorize all types of indigenous thought. However, the old indigenous scholars do not get enough credit for what they did, because what they ended up doing is they ended up writing secret code into the Florentine Codex that the Spaniards did not understand. And they did this to preserve their own indigenous ways. So this is one of the very earliest forms of indigenous resistance and resilience. And this is what I ask my students to study. So for example, another form of resistance, and the reason for this cover is, you have a lowrider car, which is another way of occupying space and of challenging, colonization. How do I?
The keyboard that's left.
Oh, this one?
Yep.
So the patterns of historical racism put Chicanos and Chicanas and Mexican people at a disadvantage, since AI stores information from scholarship that is racist. So already perpetuating racist characterizations and stereotypes of Mexican people, of Chicanos and Chicanas, of Latinos across different industries, not to mention the eugenics movement movements across history, which really have been very, destructive and even deadly for Mexican women, especially, when it has to do to their health. Okay, so another thing that my students study is that in Mexican history, there has been, once again, a lot of movements, especially during the civil rights movements and in union history, in order to challenge, the way that Mexican people have been treated also in the United States. But unfortunately, the literature has been pretty limited. So for example, one of the books that they study is called From Out of the Shadows by Gail, which studies women in canneries and how they formed unions in the early 1900s. So these are all forms of resistance, right? So another one, which I think is really cool, is this woman over here who's actually wearing a suit. So fashion has also been, a form of resisting, and all of these processes are so fascinating to me because they're all very tangible, in the physical world and very immersive experiences. So one of the questions that I thought would be interesting to ask my students this semester is, how can we combine AI technology with these old forms of resistance and, that are very tangible, so how do we do that? So as I mentioned, Chicanos and Chicanas have historically challenged many of these racist ideas in many different industries. And it's part of our culture, since ancient times, since even before the Spaniards, to create systems and tools for resisting processes of colonization and also oppression. And also this has been a big question in Hollywood. And I mentioned Hollywood because I'm also a full-time filmmaker. And one of the things that I also find very interesting is this creator, writer, director of a movie called The Book of Life. The Book of Life is a lot about Day of the Dead. And Day of the Dead obviously is a very ancient Mexican tradition. So I feel that a lot of people of color, and especially Mexican people, think in this way, like how do we use really ancient traditions and combine it with modern technology? So these are all, themes and topics that I encourage my students to think about. Here's a message about, I found this really profound from SAG-AFTRA that was posted on Twitter and now called X, of course. And basically it says everything generated by AI ultimately originates from a human creative source. That's why human creative content, intellectual property must be protected. So going forward, I'm really thinking about my classes as being centered in the human experience, but then how do we incorporate AI into that human experience, to create this very immersive experience. So here are some of the ideas that I've asked my students to consider as they're implementing AI. And by the way, when I asked them if they had used AI in every single class that I teach, about 50% of the class was already using ChatGPT. So they were already pretty familiar with it and also familiar with, the limitations of AI. But I've asked them to consider their own personal individual ethics. So this is where their own human experiences come in and are centered. And I've asked them to write down, what are your ethics? What do you care about? What are your values? And to think about that in terms of connecting that to using AI as a tool. And also to use it to analyze racism. So for example, looking and reading their textbooks and then looking at AI, and when they ask it questions, to critically think about, well, where are the gaps? What is missing in history? And also what are some of the potential ethical dilemmas, such as, for example, where are Latinos represented? Where are stereotypes perpetuated? And, to critically examine and look at those. So as I mentioned, I had students personally write down their, ethics and values at the beginning of the semester. And then later in the semester, I also asked them about how they think and what would make them good about how AI should be used in the classroom. So for example, one of the things that nearly everyone agreed on is that AI generally features pretty poor skills in essay writing. So they generated, some sample essays, and then I had them look at those and criticize them and make it better using their classroom textbooks, but also engaging in dialogues with each other about, well, what makes good writing, what makes good representation of Latinos. And then I also had them design a lesson plan where they find historical biases and then, write an essay from the perspective of people that have been marginalized or, made to be invisible in the US. So I noticed that they were very good at this. And then I also had them use AI to write or put together a timeline, on important events that, happened within the textbooks that we studied this semester, and then really look at where are the gaps, where are the nuances and details that are missing that would be really helpful for people that didn't have a very informed opinion about specific groups of Latinos. So as an example, one of the questions at the beginning of the semester that I asked them was, when you think of Puerto Rico, what are some things that you know about Puerto Rico? And most of them said, oh, it would be a great vacation spot. Right? And then later on in the semester, they came up with this very sophisticated timeline about very specific political events that had happened in Puerto Rico, for example, US intervention and other events, and then really were able to provide a lot of detail about how those events that happened back in the early 1900s affect Puerto Rican people today, how it continues to affect them. So they became really good at seeing, this is what AI comes up with, and then this is how I add rich detail, and then this is why it's important, because people today are still being affected. And then ultimately what I learned over the course of the semester is that students can really benefit from understanding really old cultural traditions and understanding how those were centered in, human experiences, and helps them to be critical of AI, but also helps them to understand how you can combine AI, with history, with dialogue with each other, with understanding human experiences, in order to come up with diverse viewpoints, and also in order just to have a very dynamic classroom experience, because you're not just using one tool, you're talking to your, fellow classmate, you're reading history, then you're using AI to understand, where is AI biased. So all of this I noticed created a very rich, classroom experience, and then they could see that AI doesn't necessarily have to be limited to cheating if you're thinking about it as a tool that's not going to be representative of the groups of people that you're talking about, but that it could be used as a tool to find those gaps, and then it's your job as a student to fill in those gaps. And that is all.
So I'm Emily Acosta Lewis, and I'm going to talk about what I did in my class. You heard a little bit from Brady, my student, who I had no idea what he said, but funny that he ended up in 2 of our classes. I think one of the big things that could be really helpful with AI, like I wish that AI was the thing when I was a first semester faculty member prepping brand new courses, because I had 0 life and spent so many hours on those courses that doing things like this, like creating assignments, rubrics, schedule for the course, coming up with course titles, descriptions, learning outcomes, all that stuff has been so much easier. So I know we're not really talking about the faculty workload piece, but I think that we should be talking more about the faculty workload piece. I think this is maybe a way to get more faculty interested in AI, is how does it make your life easier? You can use it in the classroom or not, but how can we help you? Your workload? This is not what it looked like on my computer even. Anyway, so what I decided to do was blow up one of my assignments, and I wanted to use AI I wanted the students to use AI for a presentation. And so I wanted them to use it to outline, to organize their ideas. I thought it would be helpful for people in terms of like having writing anxiety and not wanting to start on a new topic, right? Let's use AI, outline what you want to say, and we'll go from there. The content can be personalized in terms of the learning outcomes, the assignments that I gave them. And then in terms of engagement, I had them make sure they had an interactive component, and I'll talk a little more about that. And then they were also required to use visual aids that created by you. Oh, this is so bad. So what I ended up doing was I teach a media research, it's a research methods course in media, and it's also a data theory course. So it used to be 2 courses combined into one. And so historically, how I've done this assignment is either an exam or I've had them write a traditional research paper. The downside of that is I get the same media effect topics over and over again. So video game violence, body image, I read, that's probably 90% of the papers I read. So very boring for me to read, and hard not to compare them against each other. And so it's already a writing heavy course, decided to get rid of that. And what I ended up doing was coming up with all the sort of interesting media effects research topics that they might be interested in, everything from female body image to gender portrayals in the media, and had them sign up for whatever topics they wanted to do. There were groups of 2 to 3, and then I had them use ChatGPT to create an initial prompt, and then they had to do at least 5 additional prompts after that to get better. I had them do the same thing with Perplexity, and then they had to present in Gamma, so they had to create their slideshow in Gamma. They also had to have 1 AI image per slide, and some sort of interactive discussion piece, whether it was a debate or an interactive activity or parent share or whatever. And then it was 10 minutes per group. I don't know about you all, but grading presentations on the fly saves me a ton of time at the end of the semester. So I always, usually the last week or 2 of the semester is presentations. It's a way for me to not lose my mind at the end of the semester. And you can grade it on the fly. There's nothing you have to take home with you for the most part. So that was me. The way I introduced AI in the classroom, I asked them what everybody else asked them, right? Have you used it? What's your experience? I would say it was about 50-50 because that they used it in some capacity. These are all comms majors, so thought maybe that number might be slightly higher than that. And again, they could all be lying, and that's fine too. And so what we did in the first class was I had them all get on ChatGPT, and somebody threw out a question that they were interested in related to media effects. I typed in exactly what they asked, which was very basic, broad prompt, right? And then it spit out an equally broad, terrible answer, right? And then I went back on them like, how do we make this better, right? I had them go back and forth, and we kept making it better and better until it spit out something that was basically more detailed and concrete that they could actually use. Then I had them just play around in the class with it. So I was like, use it for meal planning, right? Like, write the 10 ingredients you have in your cabinet, tell it to make you meals for the rest of the week, right? And they were like, okay, so they wrote it even like steak, pasta, ketchup, like random stuff they would have in their house. And it did, right? It spit out meal plans for the week. So they were all kind of excited. That got them excited about using it. And I was like, think about other ways you can use it in life, right? And they were so excited to dig into it and not have people be talking about it from cheating flavors perspective. You're the only one that's doing this with us. Everybody else is so concerned about the cheating. So again, we played around in the classroom for quite a while. Then we talked about the biases and the ethics, where it's pulling its information from, and how that might not be fully representative of what they're trying to get at. Some lessons learned, careful planning is one. Because all of us started this learning community after our syllabi were already created, I had to blow up something in order to do this, right? And so I think doing it ahead of time would have been better and more thoughtful, and I would have probably integrated it throughout the whole semester as opposed to like a shot. I would say start small and expect it to be messy at first. You all are learning like everybody else is, and so you need to at least stay a little bit ahead of them as much as you can. So much support and ongoing support throughout these presentations, right? So unlike a traditional research paper, you give them the assignment, they're done, they know what they need to do. This, it was like, we talked about it in class. They needed more help, they needed more guidance, they needed to figure out how to get through not having to pay for things like Gamma only has 8 slides per person for free, and you can only generate a certain amount of images. So a lot more work on my part in that regard. And then the specificity, right? Like, we actually created this assignment together. So we talked about it. We talked about what reasonable in terms of length and what should be included and what they want to learn about. But I could have been clearer on what they needed to submit to me. So like, I would have liked to see every step along the way. And so I should have scaffolded it. I should have made it assignments along the way that were worth points, where they submit their prompt, additional prompts, then go show me what they did in Perplexity, right? I was not clear in that. And so for the most part, I just got the final presentation, which is entirely my fault. I would have liked to see more of the steps in between and how they got to that final presentation. Relatedly, some students literally just took, you was so very clear, like 5 minutes of ChatGPT, threw it in Gamma, it, and they were terrible. And then they didn't know the content at all, and they just read. And I'm like, you guys, this is like really fun content. You can talk about pornography, you can talk about media violence, like pull some of that exciting stuff out and use examples for media, show videos, right? And so after the first couple, which I were very lenient the first week with grading, people figured out that they can't just let it spit something out in 10 minutes. So they got a lot better. Some advantages, I think, was everybody was really excited. I was excited to learn. They were excited to play around with it. I think it made the classroom environment more fun. For me, and I know that Bryan has brought this up a lot, like using this for citations and rubrics and syllabi and all of that, creating assignments, or even just like I took some of my early assignments and I just threw it word for word into ChatGPT and I was like, make this more specific, detailed, or more learning outcomes or whatever. And it would spit out something that was inevitably better than whenever I created that assignment. And then I think, like the idea that we could tailor, and I know we're not there yet. I know none of us have time to do this yet, but we could tailor assignments to certain students, right? So if you have certain students who prefer to learn in one way versus another, this is an easy way to tweak assignments and throw in your assignment learning outcomes and then make it different. Some of my students said that, like I have a DSS student who has like really severe dyslexia, and she said that it helped her so much to like organize her thoughts. And then when she had a final version of paper for another class, she put it in there to help make it better, right? So she was using it as kind of like a grammar spelling check in a way, just clarity. So I think that I'm hoping to keep using AI in the future to just make my courses better, make more interesting, my assignments clear. I don't have rubrics for every one of my assignments. I can do that easily now, hopefully making it a better learning experience.
Right. Hi, everyone. I'm Gurman Gill, and I used the things that we learned in this faculty learning community to provide the same tools to students for finding some resources. So I'm going to give you some context first about what the course is about and what they were looking for. So this is CS 370, which is software engineering, so upper division students, where they learn about the software development cycle, which includes the client, what are the requirements, what software needs to be made, detailing those requirements, and then figure out having a plan, analyzing it, finally coding it. After coding, you have to test it, maintain it, and so on. So we don't need to go into the details, but that's broadly what the course is about. And the way I teach this course is they are going to build a software at the end of the course. They are making software at every small intervals, but they have one final project at the end. But what is it about is about creating games. So they are, for doing software development or software engineering is through developing games. And we use this software called Unreal Engine. It's a very popular engine that's used across the world, I would say. Many big companies use it. And so there's a huge learning curve. They use C++, which is a programming language. And once they have gotten some hang of C++, I also introduced another mode of development, and that's called blueprints. And as you can see, it's more graphical in nature. It's a graphical scripting system inside Unreal Engine, which has a lower barrier, easier to understand. You don't really need strong programming skills, but under the hood, it's still C++. So a lot of development around the world is done using both C++ and blueprints. And I had some labs for them in both of these. But as we were getting closer to the end of the semester, I wondered, well, they should use both. They should leverage the power of both. And that's where the final project, which they started like 6 weeks or 5 weeks before the end of the semester, started. That's when they were starting it. And so I asked them, how can you combine these two things? How can you combine what you've learned in C++ and blueprints and find some resources that can help you do that? Because I've already given them labs, they're already understood each of them independently, but can they combine them? Previously, this assignment, I used to give them some specific YouTube videos or links to look into and follow them. But then it occurred to me, it should align with their final project, the final game that they are making. Can they harness the power of the AI tools to do this? And so at that point, I had a goal for them. The goal for them was, can they use the AI tools to find resources? So they are not really grabbing the code from the ChatGPT or the internet because it's their project. They've already defined the parameters of the project. There is no real plagiarism possible. It's about what can I take from ChatGPT or other tools that can help me be productive in that final project. So the prompt that I actually, what I really wanted them to was investigate how AI tools such as ChatGPT and Claude can assist with finding resources and tutorials to expand your understanding of development in Unreal Engine 5. This was the goal. And of course, I used ChatGPT to generate this task. That's very short. And we have learned in this faculty learning community how to take a simple prompt and generate a whole lesson plan, or in this case, an assignment. So let's see if this is going to work. Okay. So, okay.
It's because I'm logged in.
Oh, you're logged in.
You try to open it in incognito.
Okay, so can I log you out?
Yeah, you can log me out.
That's probably better. I just wanted to show people who are not familiar with this, how this tool works. That's interesting. It actually worked for me in the incognito or regular mode, even when I'm not logged in. That's interesting. Anyhow, that's my bad. It was this.
Here we go.
Okay, so the one thing that we learned in this faculty learning community, and I want to share with people who were not in this community, is the PrEP framework, which I found really helpful because, as some of you have already mentioned, prompting is very important. How you prompt. The better the prompt, the better the outcome. So we were taught about this PrEP framework where P stands for prompt, R stands for give it a role, be explicit, set your parameters. And I just told the ChatGPT to keep these in mind when I ask the question. So that's when I asked the question right here. Use the PrEP framework to create a prompt outline for what I want them to do. And then did a long work. It gave me, okay, these are all the things you should be doing. And I combined all of this, and then this is my actual prompt. So using ChatGPT, I generated the prompt, and then it gave me a good long answer, which is what I finally gave to the students. So once they followed that whole thing, many of them were familiar with ChatGPT, so it was not a surprise, but prompt engineering was slightly new to them, so that was helpful. And I said, I gave two examples, ChatGPT and Claude, but they also used other, such as Microsoft Copilot, which turned out to be actually much more helpful. So what I then asked them, I created this, this is all me thinking that these are shareable across, but it looks like, anyhow, we won't need it. The idea here is that I gave them a Google Doc where they will fill this template. And the template is simply their name, what project they are going to work on. It's a team project, so multiple students will work on the same project. What specific resource they are looking for to help them in that final project. So they have to tell that, what is the exact prompt, what resources they found, and then their reflection. What did they think about the resources that ChatGPT, Claude, or Microsoft Copilot gave them? So this was their assignment. After they have prompted everything, this is what they're going to fill. So I have that particular link, if it worked, will show you 30, 40 pages worth of data that now I have to parse through. And I was not going to do that. So I used ChatGPT to, so there were 23 students that responded, 7 total projects. And of course, I read through it, but then I thought, well, I want to get a summary of these responses. They are reflections. They're very good reflections. What kind of projects they worked on, who worked on what. So this is the prompt I kind of gave to Claude and Perplexity. And the reason I couldn't use ChatGPT because I can't upload PDFs. Now on a free site, you cannot upload any PDFs. But Claude and Perplexity allows you to upload the PDF. And the PDF that I was uploading was this one with all their information stored in. And I asked some of these questions. How many students responded? Give me a list of project names. Summarize their prompts. And at most 10 sentences summarize their reflections. And I really found insightful response. And I found this process to be very helpful for my sake. I can go over all the 20, 23 responses, or I can use the power of AI to help me with this. So I do want to go this, I will read that. The summary from Claude was, the prompts were generally asking for resources, tutorials, documentation, forums related to various topics and features in Unreal Engine 5, such as, and this now became more specific because remember, students were trying to do this for a specific thing, specific goal for their final project. So now it gave some examples, such as creating iterative maps, implementing AI behavior, handling user input, working with audio and visual elements, and integrating external data like LiDAR and geotape files. It was a good summary. It was a good summary. If I had asked, and that's another thing that some of you already talked about, you have to continue prompting. If you're not happy with something, you have to say, okay, now add something more, or I want more information, expand on this. But the interesting was the reflections. This is a summary that Claude provided, and I will read this. In their reflections, many students found that the AI tools provided helpful starting points, suggestions, and general guidance, but often struggled to provide direct working links or specific resources. That was very, not hugely surprising, but it cannot do the work for you. It cannot do magic for you. Many times it generated links that were not even existent or were old. The students found that a combination of AI suggestions and manual searching on platforms like YouTube, forums, and documentation worked best. And this was very interesting. And a majority actually did say that whatever ChatGPT or Claude gave them, there were some interesting keywords which they hadn't thought about. They could use those keywords, put it in YouTube or Google, and now some interesting stuff was coming in. And I think that was a great takeaway. Some students expressed concerns about building bad habits by relying too much on AI. It was interesting that Claude used this as one of the summary points because there was only one student who said that. But it was still, it caught on to that. While others appreciated the AI's ability to point them in the right direction when they were unsure where to start. It was a good reflection. That's exactly what the students mostly were talking about. Now, I do want to point out, and I will stop soon, I can go on and on here, but it's not that everything that Claude or Perplexity, which is the 2 engines I used for this, were accurate. In fact, the data was for 23 students. They only said there were 18 students. They missed 5 students. In fact, the template that I provided, it was just a template, and it thought that was one of the projects. It missed 5 students. That's the name of the template. So then I actually went ahead and said, well, that's the name of the template. Ignore that. And then it gave you updated results, which was pretty helpful. Similarly, I asked, well, who are the students in each of these 7 projects? And I told it to exclude that first one, because that's not a project, that was just a template. And it gave me a breakdown. Well, did relatively fine, but it then missed in almost each of these projects, it missed 1 student or 2 students. I tried to do a little reverse engineering as to why it may have missed, because I went to the Google Doc, looked at some formatting things, but I couldn't really have success because I did try to prompt more. I couldn't find a pattern. And I can go more and more. I can say summarize student prompts, not only summarize all the summary. I can go for each of these projects. Take one project and tell me what the students prompted so that I know what they're looking for. So when I am trying to help them in the rest of the semester, I know what they were trying to find and if that was the right direction they were going to. So I think it was a very helpful tool for me to see a big picture of what students are using and what they can get. I'll not go into this, but Perplexity had a harder time. It only found responses from 10 students. And to conclude, I feel it's a great tool for analysis of large documents, such as what I did when I had so much reflection. I think it could get the summary, get the main idea very well for me. One has to be careful with the responses it gives. It excluded 5 students. It did not even know they existed. It definitely can be an effective resource for learning and finding information, but it's not the end all and the be all because many links were broken, but the keywords were very helpful. And lastly, students, at least in this course, seem to know its constraints. They were not coming in from a novice point of view. They realized that it's only going to be helpful to a certain extent, and then they went beyond. They took the content that was given by these AI tools and tried something else to find what they subsequently used. And that's all. I did create this conclusion using Gamma, but I will not show it right now. That's all I have for today.
Thank you, Kirsten.
Hi. So my presentation is about using ChatGPT on the application of theory of constraint and gain from the Department of Administration. And I'll make it quick. So the class is Business 316, production. The old name is Production Operations Management, but now we add supply chain. So anyway, it's a core course in the school business. And most of my students are junior and senior, but they are from different concentrations like marketing, accounting, finance. And once in a while, I have like 2 sophomore registering for this class. So, and the topic that I use is theory of constraint. We learn about bottleneck, and there are terms like throughput, inventory, bringing expenses, dependent events, statistical fluctuation. So the assignment is actually for students to apply this into their work environment. And I actually do it like really casually, informally. I mentioned to my students that, I'm in this CTED workshop this semester, and maybe about 2 weeks before the assignment, I told them like really informally that we'll be working on one assignment. You guys will get to use AI in the assignment. So it's like a one-time thing. I did prep that whole semester. The assignment itself, I use existing assignment. The first one is the part 1 is the original assignment. I have 4 questions asking students to apply theory of constraints into their work environment. So it's really like depending on what kind of work they are doing, service or retail. Now part 2, I add ChatGPT. So I ask students to do part 1 first, and then put that as a prompt and ask for the feedback from ChatGPT. And then students will reflect on their interaction with ChatGPT, we comment on ChatGPT feedback, and things like that. We did this in a small group of 2-3 students. I have 24 groups from 2 sections, and I did it in class, during class time, in person. And I think, was it Mark who mentioned that we like it to do it in class so you can see how they interact with ChatGPT. So I like that better. And the next few slides are students' feedback. So I won't spend too much time, like a lot of positive feedback, as you can imagine, like very thorough or informative, providing insights, little time. But what I find that's really good for me to know is I think ChatGPT expands students' point and create better understanding, dive deeper into student answer. So some students say like they understand already, but when they get the feedback from ChatGPT, it's like broader or deeper. So I find that very helpful. And some more positive feedback, some students find that ChatGPT really understand their work environment or the concept of theory of constraint. The concept, I'm not surprised, but the work environment, like, yeah, sometimes I wonder if students explain it well enough. It could be really prompt issues. I actually have prompt issues later on. Students say they use ChatGPT, make it clearer, going deeper, or confirming their answer. And these are direct quotes from students. I like this third one. Anyone writing for a living should use it. Okay. So yeah, that's from them. But some negative feedback. Some students say ChatGPT didn't really understand their work environment. And I thought that might really be a common issue because some students find that ChatGPT understand it. But for those who didn't think ChatGPT understand their work environment, they say that ChatGPT suggests something that's not really possible to do, or the feedback that's not related to their environment. ChatGPT misunderstand my answer, or agree with the answer but didn't add any detail, or suggest an idea but didn't explain how to pursue the idea, redundant answers, didn't really give answer, didn't really give insight. I like this one, insight. I think I mentioned that earlier. Insight example wasn't that helpful, especially when the question is already where is it. So that, yeah, that wasn't too surprising either. Now, for my own reflection, it does take longer than I thought. I thought the original work, part one, usually takes 30 minutes, and I thought part two might not be long because it's ChatGPT work, but actually students had to read it and reflect on it, right? It's longer than I thought. Most groups spend an hour, but there is a group that actually spend an hour and 20 minutes. Class is supposed to be done at 7. We stay until like 7:20. Some students are already familiar with ChatGPT. When one student talked to me about a prompt and he mentioned like, oh yeah, we need to add more context to the prompt. Like, yeah, good job. I provide a short prompt, but students create their own prompt later on. One student who worked for Apple told me that we could use a picture of their essay as a prompt. I didn't know we could do that. I asked Stanny, and Stanny said you could with the paid version. So yes, we did use the free version there. So a lot of students say that they have to type the whole thing, but that's with me. So you could use a picture or PDF. I think the negative comments, a lot of them come from prompt issue, and there's one interesting case where ChatGPT didn't really give feedback of the content, but criticized the students' writing. So instead of, so students, we found that funny, but I think it's a prompt issue, and maybe students didn't say, like, provide feedback to the content. Reaction, when I said we'll use ChatGPT in this assignment, some students will, like kind of smile or laugh a little. I think they're excited, but yeah. And my own concern, I do have a little bit concern of like, some students might have an idea that ChatGPT can do all the work for them. So I had my way to like make sure that doesn't happen, which I'll talk about actually right here. So what would I keep for next time? I'll make it an application assignment that apply to their work environment or their, particular situation, so they cannot get a generic answer from ChatGPT. I like to do it in person. I think I'll keep that. For next time, I definitely should train my students how to write effective prompts, maybe provide example of good prompts, not like this time when I have like one short prompt that they can use or not use, a lot more time. And switching the task, which I'll talk about in my next slide. And actually this is my last slide. So my recommendation is to promote critical thinking. For now, the assignment is for students to apply the theory of constraint concept, but ChatGPT provide feedback. I think I could switch that to have ChatGPT did the initial draft of the answer, but students also have to work, read ChatGPT's work, evaluate it, refine ChatGPT's work, so students will get to do something, and that's specific to their work situation. I like having them doing it in a group, but even if I do it individually and individual work, I think it's good to have them collaborate, maybe provide feedback to their peers, can, each other's answer and ChatGPT's answer of the other students. And lastly, I did this parts 3 weeks ago maybe, but just yesterday in my class, I have a smaller assignment, similar, and I'm like, hey, let's try this. Let's try using ChatGPT if you want. But if you do, there are 5 questions. Let me know which of these 5 that you use ChatGPT. So I make sure they understand that ChatGPT or AI is allowed in this particular assignment. It's not considered cheating. It's acceptable, but you need to let me know that this one's from ChatGPT. So the clear expectation, and of course, the final word has their own word. That's it. I think I will not do this one. We have enough time.
Thank you.
So we will skip to the critical thinking part. Everybody brought it up, so I thought I would dive into it a bit deeper. So what I tried to do is design something for use in a critical thinking class. That is a description class, but it's basically defense against intellectual trickery, self-delusion, and now we have to add machine delusion, right, to this as well. So this class, for you Harry Potter fans, defense against the dark arts. If this was Hogwarts, that's what this class would be. And this is a very powerful demon that we summon, right? And how are we going to deal with it? So probably won't do most of this, but we have a few minutes. But what I wanted to do with this was try to give the students a way of, and these would be mostly freshmen, right? Understanding building their capabilities and finding the limitations of these AI tools, ones that we could use. I just chose these particular 3. Mostly what I wanted to do was recognize cognitive biases and fallacies inside AI interactions and how this technology can induce those in its human users. So basically this we can skip through pretty quickly, but in essence, right, I just introduced the problem like we don't know since we've taken this course. Then I need to remind them about Daniel Kahneman, who recently died like a couple weeks ago, right? And this dual theory process, dual process theory, system 1 thinking and system 2. And then mostly what I want them to know is that these types of generative AI really model something closer to system 1. They don't really model system 2 very well. So if it's going to happen, you have to add that to the process. So assuming that you're going to get deep, systematic, and a critical thought about something you're not going to get it from the machine, but you can do this really good. And so you need both in order to produce something useful. So let it do that fast stuff even faster, and you have to provide the slow stuff. So what we do in this particular exercise is have a little discussion about that, right? So they've been introduced to the problem, they know what it is, they've discussed that a little bit as a class. We talk about, allow the students to share their experiences, or even just theoretical scenarios where they've encountered bias interaction with AI. It's not hard to find those personal interactions that way. And then the core of this is to do this prompt writing workshop. And again, it's like, we never have enough time for this stuff, but basically try to pair up the students in the think, pair, share sort of way, have them each create a prompt and then come together and rework that prompt, and then actually feed that reworked prompt into machine of their choice. Different groups be using different machines, different programs, and then go around and try to get them to write good prompts. Then we will see what happens, and this is where, like what we mentioned in the last presentation, is really true. Like the reading and the trying to understand what's going on here is probably going to take long. But once you achieve that, then encourage the students to share these experiences that they've had and look at these prompts. Going to basically try to come up with, like in my class, I like to try to break these things. So trying to come up with prompts that the machine may not produce good results with. That's what I like to do. And then that way they critically analyze these outputs and look for fallacious reasoning or biases that crop up. So then this should hopefully teach them that, the quality of the input is the quality of the output. And then we'll just have, a little debrief and think about ways to get better at prompting in a more critical way. So these are the biases that I think come up quite often when you're using these tools, confirmation bias. So I think generative AI just in general is a confirmation bias machine because it is designed to try to keep you and interact with you in ways that it thinks you want to hear. And so it's gonna confirm your biases. Like we were doing in class, right? It starts with a bias, and then we could turn it into another kind of bias, right? And then it would confirm that. Like it doesn't challenge you on your biases; it just tries to find the one you like, and then it just spits more of that back at you, right? So the other thing is availability bias, free versus paid, right? You're free. What's freely available is not going to be as good as what you have to pay for. I think that brings up a justice issue for our students. The rich ones are going to be able to get better stuff than the ones that don't have resources to grow in this direction. I think that's not fair, and we need to do something about that. Anchoring biases, whatever comes up first in the machine is what I'll stick with. And this new one, right, automation bias. So over relying on AI outputs without the proper critical evaluation or skepticism, I think is going to be a growing problem with our students. So then try to get them to slow down, right? Use your metacognition. Make sure that they are using their system two thinking. And not just getting caught up in the whirl of information that comes flying out of these machines. And then emphasizing the objective and framing prompts and showing how you can sort of skew the output based on prompts they give. So that's the idea in this particular thing. And hopefully by the end of the session or two of this, we will have students that can critically think through this a little bit. So we're almost done here. A couple of things I do want to talk about is we basically talked about most of this stuff already, but here are my recommendations. So Perplexity, I think, was one of the nicest ones that we worked with here. You get what you pay for. It's a Wild West right now, and that's one of the things that I really dislike about this. When we throw students out into this, are they going to be paying money for crummy programs just to try to get an assignment done? And more importantly, who are they giving their information to? Like every one of these programs you have to sign up for. And are we leading our students like lambs to slaughter into the various contracts, right? So that's sort of what I'm saying here. We're dumping all this information out there. We have very little protection, and all these little companies that we're working with, they're going to come and go in the last over the next year, and be gobbled up by bigger ones. And who knows where all this information is going to go? Got to read the terms, and free is significantly less valuable than the paid service, and hopefully we will have, this is what I really would like. Never happened. Hopefully, like we could solve this problem really easily by figuring out which is the best ones, right? Which are the most protective of our students, and then, wall the garden a little bit, keep them in it, right? And I think that's important. We do that physically. We need to do that digitally as well. We can wish, right? So that's my presentation. Oh, I want to add one thing. Mike. So I want to reiterate, yes, let's do a class on custom GPTs, like just jump right into that, right? And then GPT with research methods. I didn't get to talk about that because I didn't have enough time, but I wanted to talk about how I used it in research with stuff sort of well.
I just wanted to thank Kyle and Sandra. I feel like this class was infinitely more valuable than I ever imagined. And I also want to thank Mary. Actually, Mary, I learned so much from you in this class. I really did. So just quickly, for time's sake, I took the class in AI for several reasons. First of all, I wanted to serve students most effectively. Secondly, I always like to challenge myself. I already have a slight challenge with my vision. And so I thought, why not get ahead of the curve and experience what my students do in learning. And there's that concern about how to catch cheating. I don't even think of it as cheating anymore. I give students the charitable vision of them doing their best. And so I'm convinced now from Hutchins, and that's where we assign only essays and there's no tests. I now know that all writing essays should be done with pen and paper in class, or that exams should be given. You can scroll up to the top. Or that, or verbal presentations, basically. So the major concern that I brought to bear on this was that I noticed over the course of this semester alone in my big 40-person Native American literature class, at the beginning of the class, most people seemed to be writing their own assignments. I would say 30% to 50% now seem to be using AI. And so talk about it being here. I wanted to use it proactively. And so I applied the methods we learned to my course on blocking creativity. And you can see the description here. I won't read through it, but I'll summarize it. Basically, my unblocking creativity class is designed for students to brainstorm what they want to do for a career, what their dreams and goals are, perhaps what their artistic dreams are, but it's also very effective at teaching students about procrastination and perfectionism. And so the first assignment that I did was to use the obvious ChatGPT to brainstorm small steps toward achieving their creative dreams. And so in the first assignment, as it says here, students were asked to create, save, turn in prompts on a dream goal objective in their lives. And that ultimately will be, that's an iteration of what will be a video. And I'm about to watch those next week, so I'm really excited. A video about their creative dreams. And the sample I used, although I'm learning from you all that create might be a problematic word in ChatGPT, but I asked them to use versions of this creating list, small steps toward their dream. And they were pretty impressed. Many of the students in my class just want to get married and have children. And so I said, okay, let's put that into ChatGPT. How do I create a list of small steps toward having children and being married? It was astonishingly good. It was get couples counseling, learn about parenting. I thought I was really impressed that even what seemed ridiculous actually came up with some pretty good advice. So they turned in a series of iterations of that. The second assignment, if you can scroll, yeah, thank you. I was fascinated by Sandra's mention of synesthesia. I really got into that. I actually sent a synesthesia video to my department, and I had the avatar ask if they wanted me to present in a department meeting about AI. No response. I'm not sure they even saw the video, but that's okay. It was fun to do. And so what I did in class was I asked for volunteers. They picked their avatar in Synthesia. I'm not going to take the time to go in and do this, but if you go to Synthesia, there are a variety of characters and avatars with different appearances and vibes. And in real time, I typed out their scripts, emailed it to them, and by the end of class, the videos were created and they could share back their experience of the video, and they loved it. They were really excited about it. It's my favorite thing about AI is the possibilities for both visual art, and there's some amazing AI artists out there creating incredible feminist art is the one I'm familiar with presentations of pre-digested versions of femininity and what it's supposed to look like. Fascinating. Always white women, always of a certain age, always in sexual. There's a kind of sexual or patriarchal overtone to those representations. Very interesting. Anyway, the last assignment I had them do, it's not Magic School Bus. I was thinking about my childhood TV show I used to watch. It's Magic School. And this was the one that blew the students' minds. And Mary, I was thinking about you with this one, and you mentioned it as well, but you click on it, you type in 3rd grade, you type in lesson on climate change, and it's instantaneously created. And I think of everything I've learned in this class, this one is the most exciting for my group of students who are future teachers. I'm sure Mary feels that way too. I don't know. I think because you're in education, that's why I'm mentioning you so much as an inspiration, but I'm actually very excited. When I started this class, I was very skeptical. And again, thank you, Kyle and Sandra, because I now see really the exciting potential of AI, and I think I'll just stop with that.
Any closing thoughts, Kyle?
I just really hope that you get the chance to talk to other colleagues about your experience, and that I'm doing what I can to try to grow the community of AI enthusiasts around the campus, because I think resources are the next step, but it's got to have enough voices that are calling for those resources to make that kind of real.
Yeah, there's some interesting possibilities. I mean, I actually think that the conversation around, getting something to access like Copilot or Gemini is actually not as far away as you might think, from the standpoint that more campuses are getting into it, and they're this is the danger of bundling services, right? Is that like more and more of the base functionality of productivity tools is like being co-bundled with those upsells. So I think that it could be there, but of course, in these resource constrained times, it's always a difficult pitch. So
how do we sell this to administrators in terms of like ways to make their lives easier too? Right?
Well,
like I'm thinking like the policy piece and there's ways that it would help them as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when I had a conversation with a campus this morning that invested those AI chat services, right? So being able to kind of the return on investment that they're seeing just in terms of like less staff time having to spend dealing with inquiries, and they're using it as part of the enrollment too now in terms of being able to follow up directly with, hey, you applied but you didn't turn in your transcript, and being able to send a message just to that slice of students selectively, and then having them be able to correspond directly with the user agent rather than the person. I mean, it's mind blowing.